You ever have that moment where you're scrolling through Instagram late at night and you see a post that says something like, "This land will triple in value in 12 months," or "Invest with us and earn 40% returns, fully guaranteed." And you pause for a second, because part of you is thinking, "This could be my way out," and the other part of you is thinking, "I've heard this story before." Because look, you're not lazy, you're not bad with money. You've probably saved something. Maybe not as much as you want, but something, and you're tired of seeing your money sit in a bank account doing absolutely nothing while prices keep going up, rent keeps going up, land keeps going up, and everyone around you keeps saying, if you don't buy real estate now, you'll never afford it. And here's the scary part. Sometimes they're right. But sometimes they're very, very wrong. My name is Noble, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, real estate, and why smart people still make terrible financial decisions. And if you're someone who wants to build wealth but doesn't want to get wiped out by bad investments or dishonest developers, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we're talking about faith in real estate and developers. Not just the numbers, but the psychology behind why people trust, why people lose money, and how you can invest without relying on blind hope. Here's the thing. Real estate is one of the greatest wealth-building tools ever created. That part is true. Over the last century, real estate has outperformed inflation, protected purchasing power, and created more millionaires than almost any other asset class. In the US, for example, residential real estate has historically returned around 6 to 8% annually, not even counting rental income. Add leverage, and that number can explode. But this is where most people don't realize something important. Real estate itself is not the problem. Developers are not automatically the problem either. Blind faith is the problem. And that blind faith shows up in two dangerous ways. The first is faith without math. The second is faith without verification. Let me explain. A lot of people treat real estate like it's magic. They hear stories about someone who bought land for $10,000 and sold it for $100,000 5 years later. What they don't hear about are the other 10 people who bought land in the wrong place with the wrong paperwork from the wrong person and are still waiting, 10 years later, for anything to happen. Now you might be thinking, Noble, but real estate always goes up. No, specific real estate goes up. Specific locations go up. Specific projects succeed. Real estate as a concept does not guarantee anything. This is where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about developers. Developers sit at a very dangerous psychological intersection. On one hand, they are necessary. Without developers, cities don't grow, housing doesn't get built, infrastructure doesn't exist. On the other hand, developers sell future promises, not present reality, and humans are terrible at evaluating future promises. There's actually research in behavioral finance that shows people consistently overvalue projected returns and undervalue execution risk. Translation, we believe the story more than the spreadsheet. So when a developer says, this estate will have paved roads, drainage, electricity, security, and a shopping complex, your brain immediately starts living in that future. You imagine the finished product. You imagine demand. You imagine appreciation. What your brain does not imagine is delays, cost overruns, regulatory issues, title problems, market downturns, and the developer running out of cash halfway through the project. And this is where people lose money. Let's do some real math. Say you invest $20,000 into an off-plan real estate project. The developer promises that in 3 years, the property will be worth $40,000. That sounds like a 100% return. Amazing, right? But let's slow down. If the project takes 5 years instead of 3, which happens all the time, that $20,000 doubling over 5 years is roughly a 14% annual return, not 26. Still good, but not magical. Now factor in inflation at, say, 7%. Your real return drops to around 7%. That's not life-changing, that's just keeping up. And that's assuming everything goes perfectly. Here's what most people don't realize. Risk is not evenly distributed in real estate. The person taking the most risk is often the small investor, not the developer. Why? Because developers often use your money to finance the project. You're not just investing, you're lending without protections. And psychologically, this creates a dangerous illusion. You think you're buying land. In reality, you're funding execution. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Noble, but what about trust? What if the developer is reputable? Good question. Reputation matters, but it's not enough. Here's an analogy. If you get on a plane, you trust the pilot. But you don't trust the pilot blindly. There are systems, regulations, redundancies, checklists. You don't say, well, he looks like a good guy, so I'm sure the wings will work. Real estate investing should be the same. Faith must be supported by structure. So let's talk about how to evaluate developers properly, not emotionally. First, track record, not marketing. Don't ask how many projects they're selling, ask how many they've completed. Completed, delivered, with titles, with infrastructure. Second, cash flow independence. Here's a huge red flag most people miss. If a developer can only finish Project A by selling Project B, that's a fragile system. One slowdown and everything collapses. Third, legal clarity. Look, I know paperwork is boring, but boring paperwork is what separates investors from victims. No clear title, no investment. Period. Fourth, timeline realism. Any developer promising fast, guaranteed returns in real estate is either inexperienced or dishonest. Real estate is slow. That's what makes it stable when done right. Now let's talk psychology again. Why do people ignore these rules? Because real estate triggers scarcity fear. Land feels limited. You hear phrases like, they're not making more land. And that's true in a literal sense, but false in an investment sense. What matters is usable, demanded land, not land in general. Scarcity pressure pushes people to rush, and rushing leads to trust shortcuts. And this is where it gets really dangerous. People start outsourcing responsibility. They say things like, the developer knows better, or everyone is buying, or God will help. And look, faith is powerful, but faith is not a financial strategy. Real estate rewards patience, not desperation. Now, let me tell you a quick story. I once spoke to someone who invested nearly all their savings into an off-plan estate. The developer had glossy brochures, celebrity endorsements, and social media hype. 5 years later, no roads, no electricity, no titles, just excuses. Meanwhile, someone else invested the same amount into a boring, already developed area. No hype, no promises, just slow appreciation and rental income. Guess who slept better? This is the part most people don't want to hear. Boring real estate wins. And boring doesn't require faith, it requires discipline. So what are the actionable steps here? Number 1, separate belief from verification. You can believe in real estate and still demand proof. Number 2, invest in phases, not promises. Don't go all in up front. Let delivery unlock trust. And number 3, run worst-case math. Ask yourself, if this takes twice as long, am I still okay? And finally, diversify your faith. Don't put all your money into one developer, one project, one story. And finally, this is important, stop chasing validation through investments. A lot of people invest in flashy real estate because it feels successful. Quiet wealth doesn't need applause. Here's what most people don't realize until it's too late. The goal of investing is not excitement, it's freedom. Freedom to sleep, freedom to choose, freedom to say no. Real estate can absolutely get you there. Developers can absolutely be partners in that journey, but only if your faith is backed by math, structure, and patience. Because hope is not a hedge against risk, and the investors who win long-term, they're not the ones with the strongest belief, they're the ones with the strongest process. If this video helped you think differently about real estate and developers, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe if you want more honest, no-hype conversations about money. And remember, you don't need perfect timing, you need clear thinking. See you in the next one.